Craft beer revolution, pioneers and the first wave. It's been said by some that although Fritz Maytag and Anchor Brewing would be a strong friend of the craft beer movement and would be a brewery that many would-be craft brewers would visit and emulate in later years, that in fact he did not build a new brewery, and it was not a microbrewery. It was a full-sized regional brewery. Those same people point to the United Kingdom and say the craft beer movement actually began in the United Kingdom. So this segment is titled, The United Kingdom, A Movement Begins. In 1963, the government of the United Kingdom decided that you no longer needed a permit in order to brew beer in your own home. In 1967, as we've seen in a previous module, the Canadian E.P. Taylor first of all put together a conglomerate of small independent breweries, closed many of them, and left the others under the management of Bass Charrington plc. He also introduced the idea of Canadianized beer. So he took the British idea of cask-conditioned, full-flavored ale, and he replaced it with the Canadian idea of an ice-cold, artificially carbonated, low-flavored, kegged ale or lager. Now, many younger people in the 1970s and 1980s took to this newer and, let it be said, stronger style of beer. However, fans of the traditional British cask-conditioned ale mourned its passing. In 1971, four men, Graham Lees, Bill Mellor, Michael Hardman, and Jim Mackin, well, they were vacationing in Carey Island, and they could not find cask-conditioned ale on tap anywhere in town. As a matter of fact, the only pub offerings were mass-produced lager or Guinness Stout. Well, after many pints of Guinness Stout, the four of them decided they were going to start a campaign to revitalize the British brewing industry. And believe it or not, once they got over their hangovers, they actually did start something called the Campaign for the Revitalization of Ale. That was quickly shortened to the Campaign for Real Ale, or CAMRA. They decided it would be guided by 5 important principles. First of all, protect and improve consumer rights with regards to beer. Second, promote quality, choice, and value for money with regards to beer. Third, support the pub as a focus of community life. Campaign for greater appreciation of traditional beers, ciders, and perries as part of their national heritage and culture, and seek improvements in all licensed premises and throughout the brewing industry. A year after they started this campaign, they had 1,000 members. They thought that was pretty good. They were really flying. 2 years later, in 1975, they had 25,000 members. In 1971, there were 150 independent breweries left in England. Out of 45,000 in the 1800s, there was 150 left. Today, in large part due to the actions of CAMRA, there are 1,285 independent breweries in England. In 1973, just as CAMRA was getting started, a man named David Lyne wrote The Big Book of Brewing. It was, in essence, a home brewing primer. If you knew nothing about home brewing, this would tell you what to do, what equipment you needed, and would even give you some recipes. It's still in print today, and over 10 million copies have been sold since 1973. This was perhaps the most extremely influential book to the craft beer movement. For this reason, homebrewing was still illegal in the United States, so there was nothing that you could read or buy that talked about homebrewing. Several future craft brewers served in armed forces stationed in the United Kingdom, and they read the Big Book of Brewing, and they tasted British beer. When they went home, they would buy a copy of the book and take it with them, so that they could illegally make beer that tasted like the beer they had tasted when they were in England. In 1973, just as the Big Book of Brewing got published, Phipps Brewery, a small independent brewery in Northampton, was bought up by the brewing giant Carlsberg. First thing that Carlsberg did was demolish the old brewery, and the reason they did that was because they were building a giant modern plant that would make mass-produced lager. The last head brewer at Phipps had been Bill Urquhart. The year after he was laid off, he decided to open Litchborough Brewery. Now, it was extremely small. Each batch he made was only a few hundred liters. He had created the United Kingdom's, and incidentally the world's, first microbrewery. Urquhart ended up training a generation of microbrewers. First of all, of course, he brewed beer commercially for sale in pubs in the area. But he also offered training courses, and he also offered apprenticeships so people could find out how to brew beer properly. Many of the movement's early pioneers in Britain learned their craft at Litchborough. However, the number of new microbreweries actually remained very small in the 1970s. The reason for that is cask ale simply did not sell all that well. It was seen by younger drinkers as, well, their parents' drink. It was uncool, quaint, old-fashioned. Litchborough Brewery ended up closing in 1983, only 10 years after it had opened. In 1976, a writer by the name of Michael Jackson published a book called The English Pub. Garrett Oliver said it was a heartfelt paean to a culture and way of life he feared was disappearing. The following year, Michael Jackson published The World Guide to Beer. It was an attempt to tell people all about the wonderful variety of beer that was found around the world, where these were made, what they tasted like, what they looked like, how they were made, what went into them. He was the first person to organize beer into styles and then define each style. For instance, he characterized Guinness Stout as a dry Irish stout. He was the first person to come up with that concept of a style called dry Irish stout. He also classified forgotten and nearly extinct styles. For instance, Russian Imperial Stout and Oatmeal Stout in 1977 were only made by one or two small breweries in England. And over in Belgium, Flanders Red sour ales were now made by one single brewery. In essence, what Jackson was telling his fellow Britons is there's more to life than ice-cold, tasteless lager. But his book set the groundwork for the American craft brewing movement. In the 1980s, American microbrewers would be looking for a way to move away from mass-produced lagers. They'd be looking for something that tasted different, a new beer. So these new brewers would choose forgotten styles from Jackson's book to recreate. What was old was about to become new again. 1978 was the year that Peter Austin opened the Ringwood Brewery in the village of Ringwood. But more than that, he also helped form the Small Independent Brewers Association, now known as the Society of Independent Brewers. Its principles were to fight the tied house system. That's the system whereby a pub could only sell beers that were made by the brewery that owned it. This locked small independent brewers out of the system and made it very difficult for them to survive. The association also wanted to ensure that members' products were of the highest quality. So they would use only the best ingredients, and they would not take any shortcuts during the brewing process. And finally, the association was going to lobby for a progressive tax system whereby small brewers would pay less tax per barrel than large brewers. Now, from our point of view, why Austin is important to the craft brewing movement is that he also consulted for would-be brewers and then designed and produced their small brewery systems for them. He did this for 40 United Kingdom breweries, but he also created 140 breweries in 17 other countries. 74 of them were in the U.S., and included such stalwarts of the craft brewing movement as Shipyard Brewing, Gary Brewing, and Middle Ages Brewing.